Media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and today we're going to be talking about whose children are they? Now, this is in the context of educational choice, and if there is a subject that sets off either people with a controlling nature, or if I can just come right out and say people with a socialist or a collectivist nature, school choice is one of those subjects that just absolutely sends, again, the control freaks into an absolute tizzy. In fact, let me give you a good example of what this looks like. This is an ad for, it's a news story with a quote from Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. We are putting parents back in charge of their kids' education. Now, Representative Eric Swalwell tweeted out this particular quote, and his response to the quote was, "Please tell me what I'm missing here. What are we doing next? Putting patients in charge of their own surgeries, clients in charge of their own trials? When did we stop trusting experts? This is so stupid." Well, I mean, I'll give him high credit for being honest, because this is really how he feels. You know, who do parents think they are anyways? They're not experts when it comes to their kids. Now, of course, I would beg to differ with that. In fact, I think it is my duty as a parent to research and to question everything for the sake of my children, not to blindly trust. Doctors are not the authority. Teachers are not the authority. Government's not the authority. I am. Now, of course, that's going to set some people off, but that's the nature of educational choice. Unfortunately, it threatens those who really want to, for whatever reason, access to those young kids' minds and want to train them up in the way that they think is best. And almost always, you're going to find that people who have that one-size-fits-all mentality, who are looking for uniformity of thought, are coming at it from a collectivist point of view. Now, I prefer the word socialist, but for some people that can cause kind of a knee-jerk reaction. But speaking of knee-jerk reactions, I want to share with you a little excerpt. This is from an op-ed that former Attorney General Jim Jones wrote. This was actually celebrating Veterans Day. And it was kind of an interesting, you know, you're not really celebrating Veterans Day, or you're not really honoring veterans and all they've done for our democracy unless you do this. And pretty much it was an exhortation to stay in your lane, do as you're told, and support our democracy no matter what. But he had special words for anyone who questions what is being done to our kids, especially in the educational arena. I want you to check this out. Jim Jones, in writing about this, says, he says, for instance, numerous false claims have been made by anti-democratic groups like the Idaho Freedom Foundation and its affiliates, that our public schools, another important foundation of our system, are indoctrinating our children. He says allegations of critical race theory, grooming, smut peddling, and whatever else are just pure baloney. IFF is engaged in a cynical effort to subvert public education so it can be replaced by taxpayer-supported private schools that would truly indoctrinate kids in the fashion desired by IFF's dark money contributors. Okay, I've been accused of wearing my tinfoil hat a little too tight once or twice. I think we have a new contender for champion of the tinfoil hat conspiracies. And the bottom line is, look, are kids being indoctrinated? And the answer is yes. Now, does that mean that that's happening at every school in Idaho? The answer is no, it's not. But just because it's not happening in every school in Idaho doesn't mean that parents shouldn't be aware of it, and for that matter, proactive when they see this kind of stuff coming up. And I just, you know, again, the idea that, well, in these groups that are fighting for educational choice, where they're just trying to destroy our school system, which is the foundation of our democracy. No, they're actually standing up for parents' freedom to do what is best by their children. So I want you to take that assurance that this is just baloney, that anybody would even think that this kind of stuff is going on. Look, it is. Anyone who has accessed libs of TikTok can see with their own eyes and hear with their own ears what the teachers themselves have been saying. And there are definitely some activist teachers out there who are looking to groom young socialists for, you know, the upcoming regime. It's really kind of scary stuff. So I want to contrast Jim Jones' take on this, that, you know, you're just imagining this. And besides, you want to subvert our schools so that you can do whatever the Idaho Freedom Foundation's dark money donors, you know, want you to do. Instead, I'd like to draw from Caitlin Shepard, she works for the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and she's written an op-ed in response to this resolution, which was recently voted on by the Idaho School Board Association. Now, this proposed resolution states, in opposition to diverting public dollars to private or parochial schools, including vouchers, the granting of tax credits for scholarship donors, savings accounts, or amending Article 9, subsection 5 Idaho Code, known as the Blaine Amendment. Look at the vote there. Yes, they were supporting this resolution, 6,504 to 922, overwhelming support among the Idaho School Boards Association. But what really is taking place there? And this is where we're going to draw from, from Caitlin Shepard's excellent article that she wrote for the Center for American Education. And in this, she explodes a number of myths. There's 4 of them in particular. I'm going to just hit 3 of them very quickly here. Myth number 1, school choice would destroy public district and charter schools, especially those in rural areas. Caitlin points out, ISBA's proposed resolution argues that private school choice would cause irreparable harm to public schools, particularly in rural areas. But the goal of education policy should be to provide the best possible education, not to prop up any particular institution. She goes on to point out that school choice doesn't defund public schools. When a student leaves a public school using a school choice scholarship, the district retains a portion of the funding meant to educate that student. So as a result, a public school's per pupil funding increases as the school keeps money for students it's no longer educating. You understand that? Imagine if Albertsons could keep a portion of a family's grocery budget after the family chose to leave and shop instead at Winco. It'd be a great deal for Albertsons, and it's the same deal that public schools receive under a school choice program. Okay, here's another thought on this. The idea that competition kills public schools is unfounded. Competition doesn't kill public schools. It improves them. And this is actually myth number 2 that she attacks here. She says over 24 studies have found that competition resulting from school choice programs improved academic outcomes in public schools. Furthermore, the experiences of other states show that school choice would not destroy the public school system in rural Idaho. In fact, public schools still operate in states that offer private school choice, yet have significant rural populations. And these are states like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Mississippi, and West Virginia. So, moving on to another myth. Private and parochial schools are unaccountable. Now, Caitlin writes, ISBA's draft resolution claims private school choice would give money to unaccountable private and parochial schools. Listen to what she points out here, though. Private schools are subject to the highest form of accountability. Parents know and love their children better than anyone else. If they are unhappy with their education or the education that their children are receiving, they can withdraw them and enroll them somewhere else. Therefore, private schools must provide a high-quality education, or they risk losing their clientele. Meanwhile, public schools are not in practice accountable to parents. While private schools struggle to return to in-person instruction during the pandemic, public schools at the behest of teachers' unions remained closed. This showed how mandatory bargaining laws forced public schools to acquiesce to teachers' unions and their demands over the needs of families and students. Her point here is public schools also suffer from a lack of democratic and educational accountability. Can you think of another system or another business, if for that matter, where if you put money into it and you increase the money that you put into it over and over again, but you weren't getting an improved return on investment, or you weren't seeing an improvement in the product that they were kicking out? Would you continue to do so? See, you don't have a choice when it comes to the public school system. And by the way, this is not to say that there should be no public school system at all. It's just to say that it's not the perfect fit for everybody. This one-size-fits-all mentality, again, is the hallmark of either authoritarian or sometimes, well, almost in every time, totalitarian regimes. But it's not the hallmark of a free nation. All right, myth number 3. Idaho students and families have sufficient choice within the existing public school system. Again, Caitlin Shepard points out, ISBA's resolution asserts that Idaho families have sufficient choice within the public school monopoly and that parents who have the financial means can send their kids to private school. ISBA only supports choices that trap families within the existing monopoly system. As a public school membership organization, ISBA has strong incentives to resist any competition diminishing their control over the system. I would encourage you, go to the Idaho Freedom Foundation website, idahofreedom.org, and look at Caitlin's entire article. Very well written, very well researched. There's none of this dismissive, it's all a bunch of malarkey. She gives you the facts, she gives you the figures, she gives you links that you can follow to see that what she is saying is backed up in reality. Well worth your time. I want to share with you, too, a clip which illustrates the mindset that unfortunately is holding sway over those who maintain that the public school system is the only way that most children should be educated. Listen to how Corey DeAngelis describes the attitude among socialists, not only towards other people's property, but actually towards other people's children.
The problem here, and Michael Malice said it best, socialists regard your property as their property, but even more nefariously, regard your children as their property.
There's the problem, and that is a big problem. So all I'm asking you to do is consider, I know it's popular among some of the legacy media, it's popular among some of the narrative enforcers to point the finger and, the Idaho Freedom Foundation, they're just working against, these institutions of our society. What they're working for is freedom, your freedom and my freedom. And that means you get to make the choices that matter most on the things that matter most. Just in case you need the clarification of what does this issue come down to when it comes to school choice, it's your tax money. They're your kids. It should be your choice. And that's something that supporters of the system really don't like you having, that degree of choice, because they know full well, if you have competition, if you have choice as to where you can educate your kids, there's a very good chance you will take them somewhere that isn't trying to fill their heads full of degenerate ideas or leftist ideology. Even if it's not happening in every classroom right now, the trend is that it's starting to creep into our schools across this country. And parents are right to speak up. They shouldn't be made to feel like they're out of step somehow for standing up for their children. So if you're one of those parents who is concerned about this, you have allies in this fight. Maybe you should take a little bit closer look. Again, idahofreedom.org. You'll be happy to see you have a lot of friends and you have a lot of tools on your side. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.